There is a great and terrible misunderstanding in the hearts of those who seek the light. You believe that to be spiritual is to share your journey, to confess your inner experiences, and to lay bare the sacred milestones of your path for all to see. This is not wisdom. It is the very temptation that would keep you from the summit. The journey inward is a solitary one, and the treasures you uncover are not for the marketplace of common opinion. To speak of them is to scatter your power, to give what is holy to that which cannot yet comprehend it. There is a sacred silence that must be maintained if the inner communion is to remain unbroken and your awareness is to deepen. What then must remain veiled? What are the very signs of your awakening that you must learn to guard as the most precious of secrets? In the moments to follow, we will uncover these 5 sacred trusts. To know them is to protect the living presence within you and to ensure your journey proceeds without interference from a world still sleeping. Let us begin with the first and perhaps most foundational trust, the sanctity of your direct inner experiences. You have, in a moment of profound silence, felt a presence that is not of this world. It may have come as a wave of unconditional love that dissolved a lifelong fear, or as a sudden, luminous knowing that answered a question you had not even uttered aloud. It was a moment of pure grace, a private audience with the divine, and the impulse to run and share this glory with another can be overwhelming. You must resist this impulse. Why must such a beautiful experience be guarded? Because the moment you give it words, you inevitably give it form. You reduce the formless to a story, and that story is now bound by the limitations of human language and the listener's capacity to understand. The experience itself was beyond concept. It was a direct infusion of spirit into your consciousness. But the story you tell becomes a mere concept about spirituality, and concepts can be debated, analyzed, diluted, and even dismissed. You offer a diamond, and it is met with the language of common stone. Consider a simple analogy from daily life. You have a dream of such vivid beauty and personal significance that it moves you to tears upon waking. The symbols, the emotions, the landscape, it all feels perfectly orchestrated for your soul alone. Eager to share its magic, you describe it in detail to a friend. But as you fumble for words, you notice their eyes glaze over slightly. They nod politely, but they cannot enter the dream with you. They cannot feel its texture or comprehend its secret language. In the act of sharing, something of the dream's pristine power is lost, even for you. The experience has been translated into a mundane anecdote. How much more true is this for an encounter with the very source of your being? This guarding is not about secrecy or elitism. It is about spiritual physics. When a seed is planted in the earth, it is kept in the dark, silent soil. It is not dug up each day to be examined and shown to passersby. To do so would ensure it never takes root, never sprouts, and never fulfills its purpose. Your inner experiences are precisely such seeds. They are planted in the fertile ground of your soul by a hand not your own. Their purpose is to germinate in secret, to send roots deep into your character, and to eventually break the surface as a transformed life, as spontaneous wisdom, as an unshakable peace. When you immediately speak of them, you are digging up the seed. You are exposing a sacred, hidden process to the harsh air of external opinion. Think of the individual who has a profound glimpse of oneness during meditation, a state where the sense of a separate I simply vanishes, and all that remains is a boundless, loving awareness. If they were to speak of this at the office the next day, what language could they possibly use? The words would inevitably be, I had an experience where I felt at one with everything. But the entire point of the experience was the yes absence of the I. The telling of it immediately re-establishes the very separation the experience transcended. The listener, bound by their own sense of self, will likely interpret it through their own framework. Oh, you had a very relaxing meditation, or worse, they may view it as a sign of eccentricity. The vibration of the truth is lowered to meet the capacity of the audience, and in that lowering, the one who received the experience begins to doubt its veracity. This is the great protection. By holding these experiences in the silent sanctuary of your heart, you allow them to work on you. They are not trophies to be displayed. They are catalytic fires meant to burn away the dross of your personal sense of self. Each time you are granted such a grace, it is an invitation to go deeper, to abide in that state more permanently. But if you speak of it, the energy that was meant for that deeper immersion is instead expended outwardly. The thrill of the story replaces the substance of the transformation. The world, still operating on the level of duality, of good and bad, success and failure, me and you, will inevitably try to categorize your experience to fit it into a box. It cannot be put in a box. And in the attempt, the fragile, nascent awareness within you can be harmed. Therefore, you learn to walk with this secret. You carry it as a hidden flame that warms you from within. You will find that its light begins to inform your actions without you having to proclaim it. Your reactions in a moment of conflict may become more compassionate, not because you are trying to be spiritual, but because the love you encountered in silence is now expressing itself through you. Your decisions may carry a deeper, more unshakable certainty, not because you are quoting scripture, but because you are abiding in a knowing that was given to you in a moment of wordless communion. The fruit of the experience will be evident in the changed quality of your life, not in the stories you tell about your spiritual accomplishments. The world does not need to hear your testimony. It needs to see the evidence of your peace, a peace that can only be cultivated in the quiet, protected places within. This sacred protection extends naturally from the inner experience to the very methods that foster its arrival, the specifics of your spiritual practices. You have been guided to a certain form of meditation, a unique rhythm of prayer, or a personal ritual that opens the door to the infinite. This practice feels like a private conversation with the divine, a coded language known only to your soul and God. The temptation, however, is to believe that by sharing the blueprint of this conversation, you might help another find their own door. But this is to misunderstand the living, breathing nature of true spiritual practice. Your path is not a formula to be replicated. It is a living organism that has grown in the specific soil of your own consciousness. To speak of the specifics is to invite the world to judge, compare, and ultimately profane what is holy. Imagine you have discovered that walking in the forest at dawn, in complete silence, attunes you to a profound sense of guidance. The specific path, the quality of the light through the trees, the sound of a particular stream. These are not incidental, they are part of the alchemy. Now, if you share this with a friend, they may respond with, "I tried that, but it was cold and I didn't feel anything," or "I prefer a vigorous run in the evening." In that moment, your live communion is reduced to a technique being evaluated on a scale of personal preference. The world, operating through the lens of duality, will immediately categorize it effective or ineffective, good or bad, strange or acceptable. This external judgment, even if well-intentioned, creates a subtle seed of doubt. The next time you walk that path, a voice may whisper, "Is this really working? Am I just imagining this?" The mirror of the world has been held up to your practice, and it's pristine. Subjective authority is compromised. Your practice is a living covenant, a dynamic agreement between the individual and the infinite. It is not a static set of instructions. The moment it is codified into words and given to another, it becomes a dead letter. It loses the very life that made it effective, which was its personal, revealed nature. Think of a master violinist. They can teach a student the scales, the finger positions, the theory of music. But they cannot give the student the intimate, wordless relationship they have with their own instrument. The unique pressure of the bow, the slight imperfections in the wood that create its singular voice, the way a specific piece resonates in their very bones. That relationship is the practice. It is the secret. To speak of it is to try to describe a color to someone who has never seen. Consider the daily life of an individual who has found that reciting a certain passage from a sacred text upon waking sets the tone for their entire day. This is not a mere recitation. It is a tuning of the instrument of consciousness. The words are a vehicle for a specific frequency of grace. If they proclaim this practice to their spiritual community, several things occur. First, others may adopt it as a rigid rule. Should, thereby stripping it of its spontaneous, heartfelt quality. Second, they may modify it, mix it with other practices, and then report back on their results, creating a marketplace of spiritual techniques where your sacred covenant is now a commodity being bartered. The focus shifts from the inner transformation to the outer form, from the silent reception of grace to the noisy comparison of methodologies. This is why the most profound teachings have always emphasized the secret place, the inner room where you shut the door. The practice performed in that secrecy is protected. It builds a cumulative power because its energy is never leaked through discussion. It is like a tree drawing water from a deep, hidden aquifer. No one sees the source, but everyone sees the strength and the fruit. If you constantly tell people where your roots are drinking, you invite them to come and dig around your foundation to test the water, to question its purity. The tree may continue to grow, but its growth is now hampered by the interference at its roots. Let your practice be so deeply internalized that it becomes invisible even to you as a separate activity. It should become as natural and unremarkable as breathing. You do not announce to your household, "I am now going to engage in the process of respiration." You simply breathe. So it must be with your communion. The specifics are the scaffolding, necessary for a time, but the less you speak of the scaffolding, the more people will see the building that is being erected, a life of increasing stability, wisdom, and love. They will see the effect and may be drawn to their own inner search, but they will not be able to pin your light to a specific technique or time. Your practice remains a protected, living stream, and you its silent, grateful guardian. Just as the specifics of your practice must be guarded, so too must the profound and personal revelations that arise from that sacred silence. These are not intellectual understandings or theological concepts you have studied. They are living truths that have been unveiled to you from within, truths that now feel as much a part of you as your own breath. This is the third sacred trust, the depth of your personal revelations. When a flash of insight dissolves a lifelong confusion, or a new principle for living is written upon your heart, the joy can feel uncontainable. You wish to stand on the rooftop and proclaim the mystery that has been solved. Yet, this is the precise moment for the most profound spiritual discretion. A revelation is a delicate and living thing. It is given to you, for you, at a specific point in your unfoldment. Its purpose is to reorganize your own consciousness, to shatter a personal limitation, to guide your next step. It is custom made for your soul's current curriculum. To offer this raw, undigested truth to another is like giving a powerful, specific medicine intended for one patient to everyone you meet. At best, it will be inert. At worst, it will cause a reaction, for their system is not prepared for it. The revelation that freed you from the chains of resentment, for instance, will be heard as an abstract platitude by someone still tightly gripping their own grievance. They cannot hear the music you hear. They can only see the notes on the page and find them ordinary. Consider a simple, daily life example. You have struggled for years with a pattern of financial anxiety, seeing money as a scarce resource to be hoarded. Then, in a moment of quiet grace, a knowing dawns. You see that your true currency is not paper, but the flow of divine ideas, of intelligence, love, and opportunity. This realization shifts your entire being. You feel a sense of abundance that has nothing to do with your bank balance. The fear vanishes. Now, imagine you immediately try to explain this to a colleague who is in the throes of their own financial panic, meticulously budgeting out of terror. You say, money is just an idea, your supply is infinite from God, to you this is a lived reality. To them, it may sound like spiritual bypassing, a denial of their very real struggle. They may feel judged, misunderstood, or worse. They may adopt the words as a superficial mantra without the underlying realization, using the language of abundance to mask a deep-seated fear, thereby delaying their own authentic healing. When you speak a revelation prematurely, you externalize an internal process. The energy that was meant for the deep integration of that truth is diverted into the effort of explaining and defending it. The revelation, which was a living seed of transformation, becomes a static position you must now uphold. You have moved from being a living demonstration of the truth to being a salesman for a concept. This creates a subtle division within you and without. People will now relate to the concept you profess, not to the silent truth you are embodying. They will argue with the words, while the actual proof, your newfound peace and freedom, goes unnoticed because you are now in the way, standing behind the loud banner of your own proclamation. There is a deeper, more mystical reason for this silence. A true revelation is a direct impartation from the infinite to the individual. It is a holy covenant. To speak of it casually is to break the covenant, to take what was given in the secret place and throw it into the public square. The vibratory rate of that truth is so high that the lower vibrations of the unawakened world cannot hold it and will, by a law of nature, seek to shatter it. This is not a malicious act. It is a simple law of physics. Light exposes shadow, and shadow recoils. You will find that when you share a deep revelation, it is often met with skepticism, debate, or a blank stare that cannot receive it. This reaction is not a reflection of the truth's validity, but a demonstration that the container you are offering it to is not yet prepared. The rejection you feel can then create a wound around the revelation itself, making you doubt the very grace that set you free. Therefore, you must let these revelations do their silent work. Let them cook within you. Let them become the very marrow of your bones and the lens of your perception. The revelation about the nature of supply, when kept sacred, will not manifest as a slogan you repeat, but as a calm, creative confidence in your work. The revelation about the illusion of resentment will not be a lecture you give, but as a newfound capacity to listen without judgment. The truth, when embodied, speaks for itself in a language beyond words. It communicates through the quality of your presence, the kindness in your eye, the unshakable peace in the midst of a storm. People will be drawn to this light and will ask, not for your philosophy, but for the secret of your peace. And even then, you will point them not to your personal revelation, but inward, toward their own capacity to receive, protecting the sanctity of what was given to you in the silent intimacy of your own awakening. Building upon the sanctity of your revelations, we come to the very heart of your private communion, the nature of your prayer. This is not the prayer of petition, of asking for things from a distant God, but the prayer of listening, of union, of becoming one with the divine presence. This fourth trust is perhaps the most intimate, for it concerns the unspoken dialogue that forms the core of your spiritual existence. To speak of the specific nature of this communion is to risk turning a living relationship into a subject for discussion, reducing the ineffable to mere anecdote. When you enter that sacred silence, you are engaging in an act of pure being. It is a state where the you that you normally present to the world dissolves, and what remains is a receptive openness, a vessel waiting to be filled. In this state, there are no words, no formal requests, only a profound sense of presence. Perhaps you experience it as a wave of peace that stills all mental chatter, or as a luminous emptiness that is paradoxically full, or as a direct knowing that requires no intermediary thought. This is your private audience with the infinite, and its texture, its flavor, its unique quality is meant for you alone. To attempt to describe this to another is like trying to describe the taste of a mango to someone who has only ever eaten bread. The experience is fundamentally incommunicable, and the attempt to communicate, it creates a separation from the experience itself. Consider the daily life of a musician who has a deeply personal, almost mystical connection to their instrument. When they play, they are not merely executing notes on a page, they are in a state of flow, a dialogue where the boundary between the player and the played upon blurs. The music pours through them. If this musician were to constantly stop and explain to an observer, "Now I am feeling the resonance in my chest," or "This passage is where I lose all sense of self," the magic would be shattered. The act of observation and description would break the very union they are describing. The same is true of your deepest prayer. The moment you step outside of the experience to formulate a story about it, you have left the Holy of Holies and are now standing in the outer court, talking about the furniture. This temptation is particularly subtle because it often masquerades as spiritual sharing. You may feel a desire to testify to the power of your practice, to describe the warmth, the light, or the profound silence you encounter. But this is a trap. You are taking a subjective, formless experience and giving it an objective form. You are creating a spiritual memory that is now frozen in time and language. The next time you approach your prayer, you may unconsciously be seeking to recapture that described experience, that specific feeling of warmth or light. Instead of entering the silence with an open, empty heart, you are bringing an expectation, a memory, a comparison. You are no longer meeting God in the present moment. You are seeking a past experience, and in doing so, you block the possibility of a new, perhaps even deeper, revelation. The world, operating on the level of form and action, has little frame of reference for this formless communion. If you speak of it, you will inevitably be misunderstood. Your account of a wordless union may be interpreted as a trance, a dissociation, or a simple lack of focus. Your description of a divine love that embraces you may be pathologized as a form of emotional dependency. The language you use to point toward the infinite will be taken literally by a mind that deals only in the finite. This creates a veil between you and others, a sense of spiritual isolation that is entirely unnecessary, for it was born from the mistake of trying to verbalize the wordless. Therefore, your prayer must remain the most guarded of secrets. Let it be the invisible source from which all your visible life flows. Let this communion be the sun around which your life orbits, unseen, but whose light and warmth animate everything you do. People should not know you as someone who prays deeply. They should know you as someone who is inexplicably calm in a crisis, spontaneously compassionate, or intuitively wise. The proof of your prayer is not in your description of it, but in the quality of your consciousness and the fruit of your actions. When your prayer is kept in the secret place, it retains its pure, transformative power. It works on you in the darkness, reshaping your fears into faith, your judgments into understanding, your separation into unity. It needs no publicity, for its effects are its only and its most powerful testimony. This silent, ongoing dialogue is the wellspring of your entire spiritual life, and to protect its sanctity is to ensure the stream remains pure, undiluted, and ever-flowing. The very act of guarding these sacred trusts, your experiences, your practices, your revelations, your prayer, naturally brings us to the fifth and perhaps most subtle temptation, the temptation to appear spiritually advanced. This is a snare that can entangle even the most sincere seeker, for it dresses itself in the robes of humility, while secretly seeking the approval and recognition of the world. It is the desire to have your spiritual progress acknowledged, to be seen as someone who has attained a certain height, to quietly separate yourself from those you perceive to be less awake. This is the ego's final, most clever gambit, using the language of spirituality to rebuild the very fortress of self that the entire journey is meant to dismantle. This temptation manifests not in grand pronouncements, but in 1,000 subtle inflections. It is the slight tone of spiritual authority when offering advice, the casual mention of your long hours in meditation, the unspoken satisfaction when someone remarks on your peacefulness, the subtle comparison of your own reactions to the unawakened, reactions of others. Each time you yield to this temptation, you are taking the invisible, formless substance of your inner growth and casting it into the visible world as a monument to your personal self. You are trading the living reality of God's grace for the dead currency of human admiration. Consider a simple, daily life example. You have been practicing patience, and in a moment of great frustration, you manage to remain calm where once you would have erupted. This is a genuine fruit of the Spirit. But then, later, you find yourself saying to a friend, "I just had to consciously breathe and center myself when that happened," with a subtle implication that you handled it better than others might have. In that moment, the pure, impersonal expression of patience has been co-opted by the personal I, the energy of the accomplishment, which should have been absorbed silently to fuel further growth is instead spent on reinforcing your self-image as a patient person, the next time a test comes, you may find yourself performing patience for your own inner audience, rather than simply being patience itself. The living quality has been replaced by a staged one. This desire for recognition is a leak in the vessel of your consciousness. The power that is gathered in silence through your guarded practices and revelations is meant to be conserved for the next stage of your ascent. It is a precious and cumulative energy. When you spend it on crafting an image, you are dissipating that power. It is like carefully filling a reservoir only to puncture a hole in the dam so that passers-by can admire the flow. The reservoir never fills, and the energy meant for sustained power is wasted in a temporary display. The world's acknowledgement is a hollow substitute for the genuine confirmation that comes only from within as a quiet, wordless knowing that you are moving in alignment with a divine rhythm. Furthermore, to seek to appear advanced is to misunderstand the very nature of the path. True spirituality is a process of subtraction, not addition. It is the unlearning of the personal self, the stripping away of pretension, the dissolution of the need for any special identity, including a spiritual one. The moment you cling to the identity of being awake or advanced, you have created a new costume for the ego to wear. You have simply traded a worldly costume for a spiritual one, but the actor beneath remains the same. The goal is not to become a spiritually advanced person, but to discover that which is prior to personhood itself, the pure, anonymous I am that is one with all that is. Therefore, you must learn to walk in a holy anonymity. Let your growth be utterly invisible to the world, and more importantly, let it be invisible even to your own evaluating mind. When a moment of true grace manifests as wisdom or compassion, let it pass without your mental commentary claiming it as your own. Receive it, express it, and release it as a window receives and transmits light without ever claiming to be the source of the sun. The greatest evidence of a profound inner life is not a reputation for holiness, but a natural, unself-conscious simplicity. It is the ability to be fully present without a label, to engage with the world without the constant, subtle agenda of managing your spiritual image. When you are free from the need to appear any particular way, you are finally free to be. And in that being, the light you have guarded so jealously in secret will shine forth of its own accord, not as a beacon pointing to you, but as a radiance that points all who see it back to the silent, sacred source within themselves. And so we arrive at the final, practical application of this sacred silence, the identity of your true spiritual companions. After learning to guard your experiences, your practices, your revelations, the nature of your prayer, and even the appearance of your own progress, a profound question naturally arises. With whom, then, can you share this journey? Is it a path of total isolation? The answer is no, but the discernment required is as subtle as it is vital. Your true spiritual companions are not necessarily those who speak the same language or profess the same beliefs. but those in whose presence your silence is understood, your growth is protected, and your inner flame is sheltered, not exposed. This is not a matter of judgment or elitism, but of vibrational resonance. Just as a specific tuning fork will only cause another of the same pitch to hum in sympathy, your innermost being will recognize its true companions through a silent, mutual recognition that requires no declaration. These relationships are not forged through the exchange of spiritual resumes or the comparing of experiences. They are discovered in the quiet spaces between words, in a shared understanding that transcends doctrine, in a gaze that communicates more than speech ever could. In their presence, you feel no compulsion to explain your practice or justify your revelations. You can simply be in your unfolding, and they in theirs, in a parallel journey that provides the comfort of companionship without the burden of explanation. Consider the contrast in daily life. You may have a colleague with whom you discuss philosophy or the latest spiritual book. The conversation is stimulating an exchange of concepts. Yet, you instinctively withhold the raw, personal truth of your last meditation, the specific guidance you received in a moment of despair. You sense, intuitively, that this information would become grist for the mill of intellectual discussion. Now, consider another individual. You may rarely speak of spiritual matters at all, but in their presence, during a simple walk or a shared silence, you feel a profound peace. You sense they are anchored in something deep and unshakable. Without a word being uttered on the subject, you know they are a fellow traveler. This knowing is the only credential that matters. To speak freely with those who are not true companions is to invite a subtle, often unintentional, form of spiritual sabotage. Imagine you have a friend who is deeply empathetic and caring, but whose consciousness is still rooted in the world of effect, of problems and solutions. You attempt to share a revelation you received about the illusory nature of a particular fear. Their response, born of love, is to immediately try to solve the problem of the fear. Have you tried this technique? What does your teacher say? Maybe you should see a therapist. Their well-intentioned questions pull you back into the very level of consciousness from which your revelation had freed you. The conversation meant to share a light instead becomes a reinforcement of the problem. The companion, however, would have simply listened, nodded with an understanding that goes beyond the problem itself, and perhaps held a space of silence that allowed your revelation to grow deeper roots within you. This principle of guarded companionship is the ultimate protection for the fragile ecosystem of your awakening. Every time you share a sacred truth with a consciousness that cannot yet hold it, you are not just risking misinterpretation, you are actively participating in the dissipation of its power. The energy goes out, meets a vibration that cannot match it, and is scattered. When you reserve that sharing for the true companion, the energy circulates, amplifies, and blesses both of you. It is the difference between shouting a secret into a busy street and whispering it in a soundproof room to one who already knows. Therefore, let your discernment and relationship be as sharp as your dedication to your inner practice. Learn to feel the quality of a presence. Does this person's attention make you feel more centered and at peace, or does it pull your energy outward into self-explanation and justification? Do you leave their presence feeling replenished and confirmed in your being, or subtly drained and misunderstood? This is not a judgment of their worth, but a recognition of your respective places on the path. Your journey is a holy pilgrimage, and you must be fiercely protective of who you allow to walk beside you in the inner sanctums. Not everyone deserves access to the building site of your soul. Some are meant to admire the finished structure from the street. Others are invited to witness the scaffolding, the dust, and the raw materials, because they are master builders themselves, engaged in the same sacred work. To recognize the difference is the wisdom that completes the circle of silence, ensuring that the treasures of your heart are shared only where they can be received as the sacred gifts they are.